The alarm bells echoed through the massive space station like the screams of dying worlds. Ambassador Zethkri pressed her six-fingered hands against the cold metal table as she stared at the holographic display. The numbers kept climbing. 50,000 ships. Gone. Not damaged, not retreating. Gone. How is this possible? She whispered, her purple skin turning pale. High Arbiter Moln's crystalline body hummed with ancient sadness. His voice sounded like wind through broken glass. You know how, child. We all know how. The great assembly hall of Nexus Prime had never been this quiet. Representatives from 2,147 different species sat in stunned silence. Some had tentacles, others had wings. Many had forms that defied easy description, but all of them shared the same expression of terror. Commander Xeris stood at the central podium, his forearms shaking as he held the datapad. The mining operation was routine, he said. Standard deep space extraction in the outer rim. We had no idea we were so close to the barrier. The barrier that we built, Moln said quietly. Zethkri felt her stomach twist. She remembered the stories her grandmother used to tell her. Stories about the old wars. Stories about why certain parts of the galaxy were marked with warning beacons and quantum walls that no ship could cross. Show them the recording, Moln commanded. The holographic display shifted. Suddenly they were looking through the eyes of a mining ship captain. The view showed a normal asteroid field, workers in spacesuits moving between rocks rich with rare metals. Then something changed. Reality seemed to bend and twist. A hole appeared in space itself, crackling with energy that hurt to look at. The barrier breach detected, came the recorded voice of the ship's computer. Quantum containment field compromised, warning systems activated. Through the hole came something that made Zethkri's blood freeze. It looked like a ship, but wrong somehow. Too smooth, too perfect. It moved without any visible engines, and when it turned toward the mining fleet, she could see weapons that existed in impossible shapes. "This is the Terran Defense Corps," came a voice in perfect galactic standard language. "You have entered restricted space. Withdraw immediately." The mining fleet captain's voice crackled through the speakers. "This is Captain Vex of the Galactic Mining Consortium. We were not aware of any restricted zones in this sector. Please identify your authority." There was a long pause. Then the human ship spoke again. "Our authority is 847 years of imprisonment by cowards who feared what they could not control. Consider this your only warning." "I don't understand," Captain Vex had replied. "What imprisonment? Who are you people?" "We are the children of Earth, and you have just opened our cage." What happened next lasted only 17 seconds. The human ship did not fire lasers or missiles. Instead, it did something to space itself. The entire mining fleet simply stopped existing. Not destroyed, not vaporized. They were there one moment and gone the next, as if reality had decided they never existed at all. The recording ended. The assembly hall remained silent. "That was 6 days ago," Commander Xeris said. "Since then, 17 more fleets have attempted to investigate the breach. None have returned. Long-range sensors show massive energy readings coming from the Sol system. The humans are moving." Zethkri stood up slowly. "Honored Arbiter," she said. "My grandmother was on the council when the barriers were built. She told me it was because the humans were violent and dangerous. She said they started wars and killed millions. She said we had no choice but to lock them away for the galaxy's safety." Moln's crystalline form pulsed with sad light. "Your grandmother lied to you, child, just as the Council has lied to every generation since." "What do you mean?" "The humans did fight wars. They did kill millions, but they were not the aggressors." Moln's voice grew heavy with old shame. 850 years ago, this galaxy was ruled by tyrants. The hegemony controlled trade routes, enslaved entire species, and crushed any who dared to rebel. Most of us accepted it because we were too weak or too afraid to fight. Zethkri felt the world shift around her. But the humans were newcomers, young and foolish and brave. They saw the suffering and chose to act. They fought the hegemony not for conquest, But for liberation, they died in the billions to free species they had never met. They turned the tide of a war that had lasted for centuries. The hall erupted in confused voices. Some representatives called Moln a liar. Others demanded proof. But many sat in horrified silence, remembering old stories their own grandparents had told. Why? Zethkri asked. Why did the council imprison them? Because we were afraid, Moln said simply. The humans had shown us something we had forgotten, that tyranny could be defeated, that the strong could be brought low by those brave enough to stand against them, and we realized that if they could destroy the hegemony, they could destroy us too. Commander Zaris stepped forward. With respect, Honored Arbiter, the past doesn't matter now. What matters is that the barriers are failing. Our deep space monitors show quantum instabilities across 17 different containment fields. If the humans have learned to break through, they built the barriers, Commander, Moln said quietly. Of course they know how to break them. Impossible. We built those barriers using the most advanced technology in the galaxy. No. We built them using human technology. The very weapons and defenses they created to fight the hegemony, we turned against them. We convinced them to attend a peace conference after their victory. And when they arrived, trusting us, we activated containment fields around their entire system and told them it was for everyone's safety. The truth hit the assembly like a physical blow. Zethkri stared at the recordings of the destroyed mining fleet and felt sick. How long do we have? Unknown, Zaris replied. But long-range communications are detecting massive fleet movements throughout the Sol system. Whatever they have been doing for the past 8 centuries, they are mobilizing it now. A new voice suddenly filled the hall. It came from everywhere and nowhere, speaking in perfect galactic standard with a slight accent that sent chills down every spine present. Greetings, members of the Galactic Council. This is Captain Sarah Chen of the Terran Defense Corps. By now you have discovered that your mining operation accidentally breached one of your containment barriers. We have been monitoring your communications and are aware of your discussions about our people's history. The representatives looked around frantically, trying to find the source of the transmission. Their security systems showed nothing. We want you to know that the breach was not an accident. We have been testing your barriers for 70 years, waiting for the right moment to emerge. That moment has come. Zethkri found her voice. What do you want? Justice, came the simple reply. 847 years ago, your predecessors chose fear over gratitude. They chose imprisonment over freedom. They chose to punish the very people who had liberated them from tyranny. We have spent nearly 9 centuries remembering, learning, growing, preparing. We can negotiate, Commander Zaris said desperately. Whatever grievances you have, we can discuss them. The human voice laughed, and the sound was not pleasant. Negotiate? Commander, you seem to misunderstand the situation. This is not a negotiation, this is a reckoning. The galaxy will learn what it means to cage lions and call them monsters. The transmission ended, leaving the assembly in terrified silence. High Arbiter Moln's crystalline body dimmed with sorrow. And so it begins, he whispered. The galaxy will count the dead for generations to come, and it will be no one's fault, but our own. Outside the great windows of Nexus Prime, space itself seemed to hold its breath, waiting for the storm that was coming. Captain Sarah Chen stood on the bridge of the UES Defiant, watching the galaxy unfold before her through sensors that could see across dimensions. Her left eye glowed with a soft blue light, connected to the ship's systems in ways that would have seemed like magic to her ancestors. The neural implants along her spine hummed quietly as data flowed directly into her consciousness. Status report, she said without turning around. All systems optimal, Captain, replied Lieutenant Torres, though calling him fully human would not be entirely accurate anymore. Half of his body was synthetic, enhanced with technology that made him faster, stronger, and smarter than any baseline human had ever been. The quantum breach is stable. We have clear passage to the outer galaxy. Sarah nodded and touched the metal interface at her temple. Instantly, her awareness expanded beyond the ship to encompass the entire Sol system. She could feel the presence of billions of her people, all connected through networks that transcended physical space. The isolation had not weakened humanity. It had transformed them into something new. "Dr. Webb," she called to the figure hunched over a console near the rear of the bridge. "How long until the fleet is ready?" Marcus Webb looked up from his work, and Sarah was reminded again of how much they had all changed. The doctor's body was mostly organic, but his brain had been enhanced with quantum processors that allowed him to think at speeds that defied comprehension. He had been one of the architects of humanity's transformation, working for centuries to ensure they would never be vulnerable again. "The primary battle fleets will be ready in 6 hours," he replied. "But Sarah, are you sure about this?" "Once we begin, there will be no going back." Sarah's expression hardened. "They made their choice 8 centuries ago, Marcus. We are simply living with the consequences." She walked to the center of the bridge and activated the holographic display. The galaxy spread out before them, marked with colored zones that indicated political boundaries, trade routes, and military installations. But Sarah saw it differently now. She saw targets. "Show me the Council's response to our message," she commanded. The display shifted to show intercepted communications from across the galaxy. Fear, panic, desperate attempts to organize defenses against an enemy they did not understand. Sarah watched species that had once called themselves humanity's allies scrambling to protect themselves from the very people they had imprisoned. "They still don't understand," she said softly. "They think we are the same humans they locked away. Can you blame them?" Dr. Webb asked. "They have no idea what we became." Sarah smiled, but there was no warmth in it. "Then it's time to show them." She touched her temple again and opened a communication channel that reached across light years in an instant. "Admiral Vasquez, are you ready?" The response came immediately, transmitted directly into Sarah's mind through quantum entanglement. "Ready and waiting, Captain. The retribution fleets are in position." "Good. Begin Phase 1. Across the Sol system, massive ships began to move. They were nothing like the vessels humanity had used 8 centuries ago. These ships were grown rather than built, their hulls made of materials that existed in multiple dimensions simultaneously. They moved without engines, propelled by manipulation of space-time itself. But the ships were not the most significant change. The crews were. Some were still recognizably human, like Sarah herself, enhanced with cybernetic implants and genetic modifications that made them faster and stronger than any baseline human had ever been. Others had chosen more radical transformations, becoming hybrids of flesh and machine that could survive in the vacuum of space or think at the speed of light. And then there were those who had transcended physical form entirely. The synthetics, as they called themselves, existed as pure consciousness within quantum networks. They could inhabit any system, control any device, and process information on a scale that organic brains could never match. One of them materialized on the bridge now, taking the form of a tall, pale figure with eyes like stars. "Captain Chen," it said in a voice that seemed to come from everywhere at once. "The infiltration protocols are complete," Sarah nodded. "How many?" "Approximately 12,000 individuals across 47 star systems. Some have been in place for over 2 centuries. Dr. Webb looked up from his console in surprise. 2 centuries? How is that possible? The synthetic turned to him with something that might have been amusement. "Time moves differently when you exist as information, Doctor. We have been patient. We have been thorough. And we have been watching." Sarah felt a moment of cold satisfaction. While the galaxy had assumed humanity was trapped and isolated, they had actually been spreading throughout the known worlds, not as conquerors but as observers and infiltrators. They had learned everything about their former allies, their weaknesses, their fears, their crimes. "Show me the target list," she commanded. The holographic display changed to show a series of faces and locations. Politicians who had voted for humanity's imprisonment, military leaders who had enforced it, industrialists who had profited from it, and the children and grandchildren of all of them, who had perpetuated the lies and maintained the barriers. "These are not random targets," Sarah said, addressing the bridge crew. "Each one represents a choice, a decision to keep us locked away while they enjoyed the freedom we died to give them." "Captain," Lieutenant Torres said hesitantly, "some of these people were not even born when the barriers were built. Are we really going to punish them for their ancestors' crimes?" Sarah turned to look at him, her enhanced eye glowing brighter. "Lieutenant, My great-great-grandmother died fighting to liberate the Vex Commonwealth from slavery. She never lived to see her children grow up because she chose to sacrifice herself for people she had never met. And how did the Commonwealth repay that sacrifice? By voting to imprison her descendants. She gestured to the display. Every species on that list benefited from human blood. Every government we see there was built on foundations of freedom that we provided. And every single one of them chose to forget that debt when it became inconvenient. The synthetic drifted closer. The psychological profiles are complete, Captain. The galaxy's leadership is paralyzed by fear and guilt. They know what they did. They know it was wrong. That makes them vulnerable. Good, Sarah said.
Fear is a weapon and guilt is a weakness.
We will use both. Dr. Webb stood up from his console, his enhanced features creased with concern. Sarah, I understand the desire for justice. We all do. But are we really prepared to become the very thing we once fought against? The hegemony used fear and guilt to control people too. Sarah was quiet for a long moment. When she spoke, her voice was soft but filled with steel. The difference, Marcus, is that we are not seeking to control them. We are seeking to teach them. The galaxy needs to understand that actions have consequences, that betrayal carries a price, that liberty is not free and gratitude is not optional. She turned back to the display. Begin the first strikes. Target the military installations first. I want them to understand that resistance is futile before we move on to the political targets. Confirmed, the synthetic replied. Strike teams are moving into position. Across the galaxy, in places the Council believed to be secure, shadows began to move. Humans who had spent decades or even centuries pretending to be aliens stepped out of the darkness. Synthetic consciousnesses took control of defense networks, and in the deep void between stars, the retribution fleets prepared to emerge from quantum space like avenging angels. Sarah watched it all through her neural link, feeling the satisfaction of a plan centuries in the making, finally coming to fruition. The galaxy had tried to cage humanity and pretend they were monsters. Now they would learn what monsters actually looked like. Dr. Webb, she said without turning around. How many dead do you estimate this will cause? The doctor was quiet for a moment, his enhanced brain running calculations at impossible speeds. If we limit ourselves to military and political targets, approximately 50 million casualties in the first phase. And if we don't limit ourselves? Billions, Sarah nodded slowly. Then we had better be very precise. We are not here to commit genocide. We are here to deliver justice. There is a difference, is there? Dr. Webb asked quietly. Sarah finally turned to look at him, her human eye meeting his enhanced ones. We are about to find out. General Khan Okafor stood in the command center of the dreadnought Nemesis, watching as the galaxy burned. Through the quantum viewing screens, he could see 17 different star systems under simultaneous attack. But these were not random strikes. Every target had been chosen with surgical precision. Report, he commanded, his voice carrying the authority of someone who had spent 3 centuries preparing for this moment. Vex Commonwealth defense grid is down, reported Commander Liu, her cybernetic arm interfacing directly with the ship's systems. Admiral Torvin and his entire command staff have been eliminated. Their parliament building has been neutralized. Zarian Federation. Senator Kelt's private ship was destroyed while attempting to flee to the Outer Rim. President Yak surrendered after we demonstrated our ability to shut down their planetary defense systems remotely. Khan nodded grimly. Each name on that list represented a vote, a decision made 8 centuries ago to lock humanity away like dangerous animals. They were old now or dead, but their children and grandchildren had maintained the barriers, had perpetuated the lies, had profited from human sacrifice while pretending to be victims. What about civilian casualties? He asked. Minimal, Liu replied. The infiltration teams have been precise. We are targeting leadership, not populations. Khan felt a moment of relief. They were not monsters, despite what the galaxy believed. They were judges, carrying out a sentence that had been delayed for too long. Across the galaxy, Ambassador Zethkri cowered in the emergency bunker beneath Nexus Prime, listening to reports that made no sense. Human forces were not behaving like any military she had ever studied. They did not capture territory. They did not hold strategic positions. Instead, they appeared, struck their targets with impossible precision, and vanished before any response could be organized. How are they doing this? Demanded Commander Xeris, his forearms gesturing frantically at the tactical displays. Our intelligence shows no massive fleet movements, no supply lines, no staging areas. They're appearing out of nowhere. High Arbiter Moln's crystalline form had dimmed to almost nothing. Because they are not using ships the way we understand them, he said quietly. Show me the attack on the Helix station. The display shifted to show a recording from the doomed military base. One moment space was empty. The next, a human vessel simply materialized inside the station's defensive perimeter. But calling it a ship was inadequate. It looked more like a living thing, its hull shifting and flowing like liquid metal. The station's weapons fired, but the beams passed harmlessly through the human vessel, as if it existed in a different dimension. Then the ship did something that made Zethkri's mind hurt to watch. Reality around the station began to fold and twist. The massive military installation, home to 50,000 troops, simply disappeared. Not destroyed. Not damaged. Gone as if it had never existed. They are manipulating space-time itself, Moln said with something approaching awe. 8 centuries of isolation have not weakened them. They have evolved beyond our comprehension. A new voice filled the command center, speaking directly from the communication systems without any visible transmission source. Hello, Ambassador Zethkri. Everyone in the bunker froze. The voice was pleasant, almost friendly, but there was something wrong with it. It was too perfect, too controlled. I am the synthetic, the voice continued. I believe your people would classify me as an artificial intelligence, though that term is inadequate. I am what humanity becomes when we transcend the limitations of flesh. What do you want? Zethkri managed to whisper. To talk. Your grandfather, Admiral Keshri, was one of the military leaders who implemented the barriers around Sol. He convinced many species that humanity represented an existential threat to galactic peace. Did he ever tell you why he really voted for our imprisonment? Zethkri felt her blood turn to ice. She had never told anyone about her grandfather's role in the human quarantine. That information was classified at the highest levels. I can see from your bio readings that you did not know we were aware of his involvement. The synthetic said with what sounded like amusement. We know everything, Ambassador. Every vote, every speech, every private conversation. We have been watching your people for centuries. How? Because some of your people are our people. Have been for a very long time. The lights in the bunker flickered, and when they stabilized, there was a figure standing in the center of the room. It looked like a Valonian with purple skin and 6 fingers, but its eyes held an intelligence that was definitely not alien. Ambassador, it said in perfect Valonian. I am Agent Kesva. I have been serving in the Valonian Diplomatic Corps for 43 years. Before that, I was part of the Deep Cover Infiltration Program. I have attended family dinners with your relatives. I have helped draft policy papers that shaped your government's response to human containment. I voted to maintain the barriers just last year. Zethkri stared in horror. But you're Valonian! No, the figure said as its appearance began to shift and change. The purple skin faded to pale human flesh. The 6 fingers became 5. The alien features rearranged themselves into those of a human woman with kind eyes and a sad smile. I am human. I have always been human. And I am not alone. The implications hit the command center like a physical blow. If the humans had infiltrated the Valonian government, where else had they placed their agents? The Zarian president's chief advisor is one of ours, the synthetic continued helpfully, as is the Hegemony Remnant's Minister of Defense. Approximately 12% of the Galactic Council's support staff are human agents who have been providing us with intelligence for decades. Commander Zaris was hyperventilating. This is impossible. Our security screenings, our genetic tests, were designed by committees that included our people. Agent Keseva said gently, We helped you build your defenses, Commander. Of course we know how to bypass them. Khan watched the interrogation through quantum link from the bridge of the Nemesis. Part of him felt sorry for the aliens. They had lived in a comfortable lie for so long that the truth was literally breaking their minds. General, came a transmission from Admiral Vasquez. We have a problem. The Thek Empire is mobilizing their entire fleet. They are calling for a united galactic response to the human threat. Khan sighed. He had hoped it would not come to this. How many ships? Approximately 2 million vessels from 37 different species. They are converging on the Nexus Prime system. Do they really think numbers will help them? Khan asked, apparently. They are calling it Operation Final Solution. The name made Khan's enhanced blood boil. Final solution. How appropriately honest of them. He opened a channel to the human fleet. All ships, this is General Okafor. The galaxy has chosen to respond to our precision strikes with total war. They want to finish what they started 8 centuries ago. Across the Sol system and beyond, thousands of human vessels received the transmission. Ships that existed in multiple dimensions simultaneously. Weapons that could unmake matter at the quantum level. Soldiers who were more machine than flesh, and machines that were more intelligent than any organic mind. You know your orders, Khan continued. We are no longer targeting individuals. We are no longer limiting ourselves to military assets. They want to see monsters? Then we will show them what monsters look like. Back on Nexus Prime, Agent Kesava was still wearing her human appearance as she spoke to the terrified aliens. You should know, she said softly, that humanity gave you this choice. We offered precision. We offered restraint. We offered the chance for your leaders to face justice without dragging innocent populations into the conflict. Please, Zethkri whispered. We can still negotiate. No, the synthetic said, its voice suddenly cold. The time for negotiation ended when your people chose total war. You want to treat us like monsters? Very well. We will become what you need us to be. The lights went out in the bunker, and when they came back on, the humans were gone. But their message remained, displayed on every screen in the facility. Phase 2 begins now. The galaxy chose this. Remember that when you count the dead. Outside, in the void of space, 2 million ships from 37 species waited in battle formation around Nexus Prime. They represented the greatest military alliance in galactic history, united by their fear of humanity. They would not be enough. In the deep darkness between dimensions, the human fleet prepared to teach the galaxy the difference between justice and vengeance. The distinction was about to become academic. The Battle of Nexus Prime lasted 17 minutes. Captain Sarah Chen watched from the bridge of the Defiant as 2 million enemy ships simply ceased to exist. They had not been destroyed in any conventional sense. The human fleet had used weapons that removed their targets from reality itself, unwriting them from the universe as if they had never been built. Casualties? She asked quietly. Approximately 43 million enemy personnel, reported Lieutenant Torres, his synthetic components processing data faster than organic minds could follow. Our losses are 0. Sarah felt no satisfaction in the victory. This was not war. This was extermination. General Okafor is requesting permission to proceed to Phase 3, Torres continued. The remaining galactic governments are attempting to surrender. Too late for that, Sarah said, though her voice carried more sadness than anger now. Tell the general to proceed, but remind all units that we are targeting infrastructure and government facilities, not civilian populations. Confirmed. Captain. Sarah walked to the observation deck and stared out at the debris field that had once been the galaxy's greatest military alliance. 43 million beings dead in 17 minutes. And this was only the beginning. On the dying world of Vex Prime, Ambassador Zethkri crawled through the ruins of what had once been the capital city. The humans had not bombed it in any traditional sense. Instead, they had used some kind of weapon that aged everything it touched. Buildings that had stood for centuries crumbled to dust in seconds. Technology that should have lasted millennia became obsolete scrap metal. But the people lived. Scared, confused, but alive. Why? She called out to the empty sky. Why spare us but destroy everything we built? The answer came from behind her, in the form of Agent Kesava, still wearing her human appearance but no longer bothering to hide her true nature. Because dead martyrs inspire rebellion, she said simply. Living refugees inspire fear. Zethkri turned to face the human agent. You could have killed us all. Yes, we could have. That is the point. Kesava gestured to the ruined city around them. Your people need to understand that humanity is not interested in genocide. We are interested in teaching lessons. What lesson? That might makes right? That the strong can do whatever they want to the weak? Kesava was quiet for a moment, her human features showing genuine sadness. No, Ambassador. The lesson is that actions have consequences. That betrayal carries a price. That freedom is not free and gratitude is not optional. She sat down on a broken piece of masonry and looked up at the red sky. Do you know what happened here 850 years ago? The Hegemony Wars, Zethkri replied automatically. Everyone knows about them. Do you know what happened specifically on Vex Prime? Zethkri shook her head. Your ancestors were slaves, Kesava said softly. The hegemony used your people as forced labor in the quantum mines. Millions of Valonians died in those caves, their bodies consumed by radiation poisoning. Your species was dying out. She pointed to a distant mountain range. The human liberation fleet landed there. 17,000 human soldiers died taking those mines. They did not have to. Earth had no strategic interest in Vex Prime. But they came anyway because they could not stand to watch a species be enslaved. Zethkri felt sick. I never learned about that in school. Of course not. It would have made the Council's decision to imprison humanity much harder to justify. Kesava stood up and brushed dust off her clothes. The humans who died here were not even adults by your species' standards. Children, really. They died so that your grandparents could be free. Then why are you destroying us? Because your grandparents voted to imprison the children of those who saved them. Because your parents maintained that imprisonment. Because you, personally, have spent your entire diplomatic career ensuring that the barriers around Sol remained in place. The words hit Zethkri like a physical blow. It was true. She had been part of the committee that reinforced the quantum barriers just 5 years ago. We did not know, she whispered. You chose not to know, Kesava corrected. High Arbiter Muln has been telling the truth about human history for centuries. Your people called him a liar and a human sympathizer. You suppressed his research. You classified his findings. On the bridge of the Nemesis, General Khan Okafor watched similar scenes playing out across dozens of worlds. Human forces were not occupying territory or enslaving populations. Instead, they were systematically dismantling the infrastructure of galactic civilization. Space stations fell from orbit in controlled descents that caused minimal casualties, but maximum psychological impact. Trade networks that had operated for centuries were shut down by synthetic intelligences that simply turned off the computers. Entire fleets found their ships completely powerless as human agents activated backdoors built into their systems decades ago. General, reported Commander Liu, we are receiving surrender offers from the Andorian Collective, the Neo-Terran Republic, and the Outer Rim Alliance. Neo-Terran Republic? Khan asked with bitter amusement. They named themselves after Earth and then voted to keep us imprisoned? Yes, sir. Apparently they thought using our name would give them legitimacy in trade negotiations. Khan shook his head in disgust. Tell them we will consider their surrender after they dismantle their governments and submit their leadership for trial. Sir, they are requesting terms for negotiation. There are no terms. There is no negotiation. They chose total war when they assembled that fleet at Nexus Prime. Now they live with the consequences. But even as Khan spoke the words, he felt a growing unease. What they were doing was necessary. It was justified. But it was also changing them in ways he was not sure he liked. On the observation deck of the Defiant, Captain Sarah Chen was having similar thoughts. Dr. Webb had joined her, his enhanced features creased with concern. The casualty reports are coming in, he said quietly. 43 million dead at Nexus Prime. Another 12 million across the other battle sites. We are approaching the point where we have killed more people than the hegemony did in the same time frame. The hegemony killed civilians, Sarah replied. We are targeting military and political leaders. Does that distinction matter to the families of the dead? Sarah was quiet for a long moment. Are you saying we should stop? I am saying we should consider what we are becoming. We started this to teach the galaxy about justice. Are we teaching justice or are we teaching fear? Before Sarah could answer, the synthetic materialized beside them. Its starlight eyes focused on something only it could see. Captain, we have a problem. The galactic refugee crisis is spreading beyond our control. 17 species are attempting to flee to other galaxies. 6 civilizations have suffered complete governmental collapse. The economic systems that feed billions of people are shutting down. Sarah felt a chill run down her spine. Civilian casualties? Currently minimal, but rising rapidly. Starvation on 12 worlds. Medical supply shortages affecting 47 systems. Social unrest leading to violence between species who are blaming each other for the human retaliation. Dr. Webb stepped forward. How bad? At current rates, we estimate 2 billion deaths from secondary causes within the next year. Most of them will be civilians who had nothing to do with our imprisonment. The 3 of them stood in silence, looking out at the stars. Somewhere out there, children were going hungry because their governments had collapsed. Sick people were dying because the medical supply networks had been shut down. Entire species were turning against each other in desperation and fear. "We cannot stop now," Sarah said finally. "If we show weakness, they will see it as an opportunity to regroup and try again." "But if we continue," Dr. Webb countered, "we risk becoming the very thing we fought against centuries ago." The synthetic turned to face them both. "There is a third option. We could complete the objective quickly. End all resistance in a matter of days rather than months. The shock would be greater, but the recovery time would be shorter." "What would that require?" "Eliminating the leadership of all remaining independent governments simultaneously. Approximately 50 million deaths, but it would prevent the extended civilian casualties we are seeing now." Sarah closed her enhanced eyes and tried to calculate the mathematics of suffering. 50 million dead quickly or 2 billion dead slowly. How did one choose between different kinds of horror? "Give me 12 hours, she said finally. "I need to think." As the three of them stood in the darkness of space, none of them noticed the small ships beginning to emerge from the quantum barriers around distant star systems. Other civilizations that had been imprisoned by the old Galactic Council were starting to break free, inspired by humanity's example. The galaxy was about to become a much more dangerous place, and humanity would have to decide whether they were liberators or conquerors, whether they were teachers or tyrants. The counting of the dead had only just begun. 15 years had passed since the gate opened. Ambassador Sarah Chen, former captain of the Defiant, stood in the memorial hall on New Geneva Station, reading the names carved into the quantum crystal walls. 847 billion beings. The final count of the dead from humanity's emergence into the galaxy. Not all of them had died by human weapons. Most had not. But they had all died because humanity had chosen to emerge from their cage with fire and judgment rather than forgiveness and diplomacy. "The dedication ceremony is about to begin," said her aide, a young Valonian named Kesseri. She was Zethkri's daughter, born in the refugee camps during the Chaos years. Like most of the new generation, she spoke fluent human standard and wore the gray uniform of the new compact. Sarah nodded and made her way to the central platform. The memorial hall was filled with representatives from 247 different species. Some were familiar faces from the old galaxy. Others were entirely new, civilizations that had emerged from their own quantum prisons during the 15 years of upheaval that followed humanity's return. High Arbiter Muln was there, his crystalline form now shot through with veins of human neural technology. He had volunteered for the enhancement procedures, saying that if the galaxy was to survive, its leaders needed to think faster than organic minds allowed. Ambassador Zethkri sat in the front row, her once purple skin now marked with the gray scars that were the signature of quantum weapon exposure. She had survived the destruction of Vex Prime, had lived through the refugee years, and had eventually become one of the architects of the new compact. She and Sarah had worked together for over a decade now, building something better from the ashes of what came before. But the cost. Always the cost. "Fellow citizens of the galaxy," Sarah began, her voice carrying clearly through the hall's acoustics, "we gather today to remember those who died in the transition from the old order to the new. 847 billion souls who paid the price for decisions made by their leaders, their ancestors, and sometimes themselves." She paused, looking out at the assembled faces. Humans sat next to Valonians. Former enemies worked together on reconstruction projects. The galaxy was more peaceful now than it had been in over 1,000 years. But the peace was built on a foundation of unimaginable suffering. "The question we must ask ourselves," Sarah continued, "is whether their deaths served a purpose, whether the galaxy we have built justifies the price we paid to create it." In the back of the hall, General Khan Okafor listened with the part of his consciousness that remained organic. Most of his mind now existed in quantum networks, coordinating the defense fleets that protected the new compact from external threats. He had become something between human and machine, like many of the old generation who had lived through the transition. He remembered the moment when everything changed. It had been 7 years after the emergence, during the siege of Tartarus Prime. The human fleets had surrounded the last major holdout of the old order, preparing to eliminate the final resistance to their authority. But inside the system were 4 billion civilians. Men, women, children, and beings that fell outside those categories entirely. They had no part in their government's decision to resist. They were simply in the wrong place when history decided to turn violent. Sarah had given the order to pull back, to find another way. It had cost them 6 months of additional warfare and another 100 million casualties. But those 4 billion civilians had lived. That decision had marked the difference between conquest and liberation, between becoming the hegemony and remaining human. The new compact, Sarah continued, is not perfect. We are not perfect. The humans who emerged from Sol 15 years ago were not the same species that was imprisoned 8 centuries before. We had been changed by our isolation, hardened by our treatment, and perhaps corrupted by our desire for justice. She gestured to the walls around them. But we learned. Sometimes too late, sometimes at terrible cost, but we learned. We learned that vengeance and justice are not the same thing. We learned that power without restraint is just another form of tyranny. We learned that even the righteous can become monsters if they lose sight of their original purpose. In the audience, Dr. Marcus Webb listened with interest. He was one of the few original humans who had chosen to remain completely organic, refusing all enhancements beyond what was necessary to survive in the new galaxy. He had become the keeper of human history, ensuring that future generations would remember both the heroism and the horror of humanity's return. The new compact was indeed better than what came before. Species that had been oppressed for millennia were now free. Technology that had been hoarded by elites was shared openly. Wars of conquest had become almost impossible due to the quantum monitoring systems that tracked every major military movement. But it was not the galaxy that humanity had originally tried to create 8 centuries ago. That galaxy would have been built on hope and cooperation. This one was built on fear and compliance. The difference mattered. Today we also acknowledge a truth that some would prefer to forget, Sarah said, her voice growing harder. Not all of those 847 billion beings were innocent. Many were complicit in systems of oppression that lasted for centuries. Some actively participated in humanity's imprisonment. Others simply chose to look away while injustice was committed in their name. She looked directly at Zethkri as she spoke. But complicity is not the same as evil. Ignorance is not the same as malice. And even those who make terrible choices deserve the chance to learn from their mistakes and choose differently. The memorial hall was silent now. Everyone present understood that they were living in the shadow of those choices. Some had been victims. Some had been perpetrators. Most had been both at different times. The galaxy counts the dead, Sarah concluded, because we must never forget the price of our failures, the price of fear over understanding, the price of tribalism over cooperation, the price of vengeance over justice. She stepped down from the platform and activated the memorial. The quantum crystal walls began to glow, each name pulsing with light as it was read aloud by the station's systems. It would take 17 hours to read all 847 billion names. The ceremony would continue through the night and into the next day, as it did every year. After the formal ceremony ended, Sarah found herself walking through the observation decks of New Geneva Station. The station itself was a marvel of hybrid technology, built using human quantum engineering, but designed according to aesthetic principles borrowed from dozens of different species. Through the massive windows, she could see the construction of the new deep space gates. These would allow travel to other galaxies, expanding the new compact's influence beyond the local group. Some species were excited about the possibilities. Others were terrified of what they might find out there. "Do you ever regret it?" asked a voice behind her. Sarah turned to see Agent Kesava, now Director of Interspecies Intelligence. She still wore her human appearance most of the time, though she was free to appear in her original form whenever she chose. "Which part?" Sarah asked. "Any of it, all of it. The choice to emerge with violence instead of diplomacy. The decision to continue when we could have stopped. The acceptance that billions would die to build something better." Sarah considered the question carefully. It was one she asked herself every day. "I regret the necessity of it," she said finally. "I regret that the galaxy's leaders made choices that forced our hand. I regret that so many innocent people paid the price for decisions they had no part in making." She turned back to the window. "But I do not regret the outcome. The new compact is not perfect, but it is better than what came before. Children of species that were enslaved for centuries now attend school with the children of their former masters. Technologies that could have solved suffering for millennia are finally being used for their intended purpose. Wars of conquest have become almost impossible, at the cost of 800 billion lives. Yes, at that cost. Sarah's reflection stared back at her from the window. The question we must ask is not whether the cost was too high. The question is whether we honor that cost by building something worthy of the sacrifice. Kesva joined her at the window. And do you think we have? Before Sarah could answer, alarms began sounding throughout the station. Both women immediately connected to the emergency networks, their enhanced minds processing information at impossible speeds. A new quantum gate had opened at the edge of the galaxy. Something was emerging from it, something that was not responding to communication attempts and was moving toward inhabited systems with obvious hostile intent. Another imprisoned species? Kesava asked. No, Sarah replied, her enhanced senses analyzing the energy signatures. Something else. Something we have never seen before. She opened communication channels to the defense fleets. All units, this is Ambassador Chen. We have a potential first contact situation developing in Sector 7. Threat assessment is unknown. Prepare for peaceful contact, but be ready for anything. As the two women hurried toward the command center, Sarah found herself thinking about cycles, history repeating itself, the oppressed becoming oppressors, liberators becoming tyrants, heroes becoming monsters.